and welcome back to the Hardware News Recap of the week. This is the last one for 2025 as we roll into 2026, and the disappointment build PC is right around the corner. Should be going up on January 1st, most likely. That's our special video we do every year with the horror-themed intro about computer parts. And this time, spoiler alert, I couldn't fit everything on the shirt. Actually, we had to make a lot of cuts from the video recap at the end where we recap, 2025. I basically cut it in half because there were a lot of really major disappointments this year, and pretty much all of them kind of roll into AI, and you can really only say those two letters in succession so many times before you start actually losing your fucking mind. So we had to cut some of them. I think you all can appreciate that, though, because you also only need to hear it so many times. All right, for the news, speaking of the two dreaded letters, NVIDIA buys talent and some licensing from Groq with a Q for its AI development, not Groq with a K, the Elon Musk one. In non-two-letter related news, those specific two letters anyway, AMD's 9850 X3D confirmed again, this time by Dell and Alienware, after AMD accidentally leaked the existence of its own product previously. Alienware has now done so, which maybe indicates launch around the corner. CES would maybe make the most sense as a large event to announce something like that at. Also pretty interesting, there was a post by Russian modders who are modifying blank DDR5 memory sticks, the PCBs, to solder on the actual memory chips to them to be a little bit cheaper than buying at retail, although you're still ultimately paying for the memory itself, so that's the expensive part. Some Japanese retailers limiting supply for consumers of 16 plus gigabyte GPUs, and TSMC looking to hike prices on wafers for the next several years. And then also there was some discussion of a 32 gigabyte 5080 via modders on Bilibili and found via Unico's hardware on Twitter. So a lot to talk about this week. Let's get into it. Before that, this video is brought to you by Height and their X50 case lineup, including the glass and air versions. The X50 and X50 Air cases have a unique, rounded design with a heavy focus on large ventilation ports in spite of the curvature of the chassis panels. The X50 and X50 Air use relatively thick stamped metals for many of the case components and have fan mount locations front, side, bottom, and back, with the top supporting a power supply and traditional top-mounted rear exhaust. The X50 series tested overall positively in our review benchmarks and made waves for its unique look, including multiple different colors, although the case also comes in traditional black and white coloring. Learn more at the link in the description below. All right, up first, NVIDIA's creative deal that allows it to skirt regulatory attention with a mix of licensing and hiring of key founders and staff from the AI chip competitor Groq with a Q again, not XAI's Groq with a K. They're different companies. This is not an outright purchase of the company. It's not an acquisition of Groq, but it is an acquisition of key talent and, again, of licensing. So NVIDIA has just pledged $20 billion of its nearly $61 billion of cash and short-term investments, which was $13 billion in 2023 and $26 billion in 2024. So being at $60 billion, there's only so much you can spend on leather jackets.
Do you like my jacket?
Now, they spent this $20 billion for parts of Groq with Q. The Street wrote that Groq's most recent valuation was $6.9 billion, and that this is NVIDIA's largest deal, although not technically an acquisition. We'll start with the full press release from Groq. It's relatively short. They said, quote, "Today Groq announced that it has entered into a non-exclusive licensing agreement with NVIDIA for Groq's inference technology. The agreement reflects a shared focus on expanding access to high-performance, low-cost inference. As part of this agreement, Jonathan Ross, Groq's founder, Sunny Madra, Groq's president, and other members of the Groq team will join NVIDIA to help advance and scale the licensed technology. Groq will continue to operate as an independent company with Simon Edwards stepping into the role of Chief Executive Officer. Groq Cloud will continue to operate without interruption," end quote. When we ran a search against NVIDIA's website for all prior references to Groq, we found that the company previously hired Groq's chief architect at the time, who has worked as a research scientist at NVIDIA for about 3 years now. He was at Google and Cray previously. This was already known. This isn't a secret. But we hadn't followed Groq at all. This is really the first time I've had to learn about them, so we're getting up to speed on it. That's what we found. Key in the Groq press release was the phrase, quote, "non-exclusive," end quote. So other companies feasibly could still license the inference technology. Of course, we don't know what that'd cost or if it'd make any financial sense at all for anyone else to do it. And obviously, the talent acquisition is exclusive to NVIDIA. We've seen all kinds of speculation about why NVIDIA might want to buy Groq. Some of the mainstream media have pointed more toward Groq's use of SRAM, rather than something like HBM and DRAM solutions, although we're not so sure about that being the reason. Now, SRAM on its own is not a unique technology. It's not groundbreaking. It's not new. It is fast, but it's expensive as fuck, and it doesn't solve the wafer cost issue or the allocation challenges. We've also seen some speculation that it's a play for latency advantages, and some speculation that this is specific to inference in AI type of workloads. We don't know enough about inference workload demands to really comment there. We don't test these super high-end like H100 type GPUs in our work, so I don't really know how accurate that is, but from what we quickly researched, it maybe makes sense. Another commentary point that I found was potential product segmentation for NVIDIA, where they can keep people at the high end in the NVIDIA class GPUs and then sort of segment out a new component line for people or for companies that are more cost sensitive, which would potentially use Groq solutions. And there was actually an internal email from Jensen Huang, acquired by CNBC, where Huang stated, quote, "We plan to integrate Groq's low latency processors into the NVIDIA AI factory architecture, extending the platform to serve an even broader range of AI inference and real-time workloads," end quote. I think I've probably qualified enough at this point that this is not our area of usual expertise. We're not financial analysts, and I'm not an expert in not quite acquisitions, but you're still basically buying all the stuff that matters deals. I don't know what you call it, regulatory bypass deals. But I do have a tinfoil hat. I mean, not with me, it's charging right now. It uses USB-C, it ran out of battery. But anyway, the tinfoil hat stuff, that I've got some ideas for, all right? So let's just all take a moment to get our tinfoil hats out, if yours isn't also charging. My theory is that this looks more like a play to eliminate potential competition or eliminate the ability for actual competition to buy or utilize potential competition and consolidate the technology. It's done in a clever way that, from what I understand, it should bypass regulatory scrutiny, although Jensen Huang, being BFFs with the federal government, maybe minimizes the risk of that in a lot of cases anyway. But anyway, that's kind of what it looks like to me. It seems like a just-in-case hedge, or maybe something to stop existing competition from buying Groq or the same components of Groq that NVIDIA has just licensed and or purchased, like Talent. The field is new enough that feasibly somebody could discover something or break through with a means of processing the different types of so-called AI workloads that is competitive to NVIDIA in a way that they might not expect. I mean, Google's TPUs have made some ground, for instance, and it may just be a play that NVIDIA wanted to kind of shore up their defenses, I guess, and make sure they're not going to pay out the ass later if someone actually comes in and forms some real competition for them. So they've bought enough parts of it that probably helps protect NVIDIA's stranglehold on AI. I would take the tinfoil hat off now if I were wearing it. I really need to we should start selling tinfoil hats on the store. It's gonna be like, do you put it on top of the DDR5 stick to make sure that the AI companies can't read the data that's on it? It's like, we'll work on it, all right? It's gonna be our next product launch for 2026. Biggest one yet. I'm gonna buy the best tinfoil we're not going Costco for this tinfoil, all right? We're going like high grade. Up next, the next one's pretty straightforward hardware news that we do actually know a good amount about. So this is from Dell, and it is not a rumor anymore. First found via video cards, Dell accidentally leaked, again, the 9850X3D's existence. This is AMD's upcoming Ryzen 7 CPU. The press release was captured by video cards, and it stated, quote, "Working closely with AMD, Alienware is taking the Area 51 even further in Q1 2026 by offering configurations with the highly anticipated Ryzen 7 9850X3D TM processor powered by 3D V-Cache TM technology," end quote. Now, we did verify the legitimacy of this leak. The way we did that is because there's TMs next to some of the words. Quote, "This upgrade delivers even more headroom for gamers pushing the latest AAA titles at maximum settings, reinforcing Area 51's position as a no-compromise platform built for the future," end quote. No mention of quadruple A titles, must not be compatible. This follows prior leaks of the 9850X3D, including from AMD directly and from retail partners. A couple weeks ago, Tom's Hardware ran a story about the 9850X3D listing a $600 US price via a European retailer, with an additional listing at a US retailer we're not really familiar with, but for $553. Prior to that, Olrak29_ on Twitter spotted AMD's own accidental listing hosting for the 9850X3D, which AMD has since taken down. The video cards post that went up after Ulrak's tweet and referencing it indicates a claimed 5.6 GHz boost and 4.7 GHz base for the 9850X3D, which would be a significant clock increase over the 9800X3D's 5.2 GHz boost clock, although the base clock would be the same. Now there's another one that's been in the rumors a lot, which is the 9950X3D2, a dual Vcache, dual CCD solution, or maybe it'd be called the 9950X3D X2, or the 9950X, can you multiply them? Is it X60 then? We're in 6 dimensions now. Now, these rumors haven't had as much materialize as the 9850X3D, but the CPU does look like it's going to be real. In either case, at least for the 9850X3D, which at this point has been confirmed accidentally by AMD, we would expect an announcement at CES if it's announced anytime soon. It seems unlikely they would host their own event. They're probably just going to do it at the show because I think they have another keynote there. So that's where we'd be looking. That would be within the next 2 weeks or so. You'll see that actually sooner than that. So we should have news on that soon. Up next, the next story is just kind of fun to break things up a little bit. This was interesting. So Pro High Tech, a Russian YouTube publication, has a Telegram channel. And on that Telegram page, users have been posting about DIY DDR5 memory. Via machine translation with Google, the user who created the post notes that he spoke with a modder named Vic On, who has previously added VRAM to video cards. The modder is now looking at DDR5 solutions and has found supply of memory stick PCBs blank in China for under $10. The post says that buying isolated memory chips and then the blank PCBs and then self-soldering them can result in a cheaper solution than retail DDR5 RAM. Via machine translation, the post states, quote, "All that remains is to buy and solder the memory chips themselves, and such a self-assembled module turns out to be cheaper than in retail, but not by much. A 16GB module with average characteristics will cost 12,000 rubles. There's probably no point in selling such modules, but for those who assemble computer systems, building RAM in this way will reduce costs," end quote. Now, keep it in mind that the actual completed DDR5 from sort of your normal options in Russia probably are more expensive than in the US market already. The screenshot shows a DDR5 6000 kit at CL28. The post also highlights the used chips market as an alternative to further reduce cost. That's right, check back, I guess, for primitive technologies. I guess build your own fab in your backyard, even cheaper still than this. We've covered stories like this in the past, including a custom motherboard manufacturing solution where we've seen a bunch of them in China, where, for example, in China, what sometimes can happen is e-waste boards can have the chipset salvaged from them. So the chipset from AMD and Intel are licensed and sold to motherboard vendors by AMD and Intel. And if you're a motherboard company and you want to make boards, but you don't have that license and access to that supply, you're kind of out of luck. So one of the things that we've seen firsthand in China is they'll take e-waste boards where maybe a bunch of other stuff's broken or the socket's just in disrepair or whatever, and harvest the chipset, and then they can solder that onto some other self-made board or domestic solution that has no official licensing and kind of keep the chipset at least in play and build something new. So we've seen stuff like this in the past, where in this situation, feasibly what could be done is you take e-waste DDR5 sticks. So let's say like just one of the memory chips is bad on it or something, the stick is cracked or something like that, and you could harvest all the other components and then repopulate them onto a blank PCB. It's kind of like what we've seen in the GPU department with Brother John's shop, which we're going to talk about more in a minute here. And so it's, you know, it's a cool enthusiast type thing to do. Maybe not the most practical for everybody, but cool nonetheless, and sad that we are at this point. While on the topic of hardware rationing, IT Media in Japan is reporting that some retail shops are restricting the 16GB GPU supply. Via machine translation, the website reads, quote, "The situation for memory and storage remains challenging. The 16GB versions of the RTX 5060 Ti and 9060 XT might be difficult to find now," end quote. The post actually says 9600 XT, but we assume that they mean the 9060 XT and not the ATI All-in-Wonder card. The post also says, quote, "In fact, Tsukumo EX has implemented strict purchase restrictions, limiting customers to one card per group for the 5060 Ti 16GB or higher models and Radeon RX 9000 series or higher," end quote. The site quotes a store as stating, quote, "Cards with large amounts of memory are becoming quite difficult to procure. We still have stock at the moment, but we don't know when or if we'll receive more," end quote. IT Media stated that 16GB model cards, where variations exist, and higher-end models are affected. Up next, Taiwanese media publication Unico's Hardware recently tweeted about a 5080 32GB reference in a Bilibili upload from, as far as we can tell, a Chinese repair shop. The Unicos hardware tweet notes that the cards aren't yet on Taobao for retail purchase. We checked the source video and it appears to be unrelated to the actual discussion topic of 32GB RTX 5080s. The repair technician in the video is manually rewiring a PCB and repairing it, which is pretty cool on its own. The card in the video shows in GPU-Z as a 16GB model GPU at the end of the test run. Now, it is possible it's just like a firmware difference, not flash or something doesn't see it. But as far as we could tell, doing my best to translate it, I think it's an unrelated GPU to the main story here. The repair job is impressive though. The 32GB 5080 story comes from what the user is saying rather than what's shown in the GPU-Z screenshot, which is that 32GB RTX 5080 mods are already available on the market locally in China. The user calls these modified 32GB turbo cards for the 5080s, and he speculates that the 5080 prices might increase as a result of the mod. Now, some things don't change because basically the card being repaired is a warranty reject from a manufacturer, and the repair shop is fixing some traces at a cracked PCIe foot. Now, as far as the VRAM situation of modding the 5080 to have more, this is something we have seen in person. So in our Black Market documentary, there's a section where we visit a repair shop. The repair shop is super cool. It's Brother John's repair shop. He's got a Billy channel. Unbelievably talented guy and crew there. And they're just a repair shop. They fix things that are broken, and then they can also mod things using those same skills that they have. So when we were there, in about 2 hours, they modified 24GB stock 4090 that was kind of busted into a 48GB 4090. And for this reason, because they can be relatively easily, I guess, if you know what you're doing, modded into 48GB cards, the 4090s for a while were more valuable in China than the 5090s because you could add a lot of VRAM to them, you get more capacity, and they were relatively easy to work on with a good supply of blank PCBs. So this is not like a new type of thing. This has been done for a long time now, but 5080 32GB cards might be the next to kind of appear. We looked around, I couldn't find any to buy, but we may message a few people and try to do that. All right, up next, a new paywalled report on the information picked up by Tom's Hardware suggests that OpenAI will be moving toward a new sponsored content model that seems to us to be more invasive than standard advertising on like Google search or something. According to Tom's, OpenAI said this to the information, quote, "As ChatGPT becomes more capable and widely used, we're looking at a way to continue offering more intelligence to everyone. As part of this, we're exploring what ads in our product could look like," end quote. Now look, we have ads in our videos. I don't think it's gonna offend any of the advertisers who work with us if I say, that's not intelligence, all right? Ads are to sell you shit. It's just what they are. Like, it's just, there's no bullshit about it. That's what it is. It's not intelligence, though. Like, come on. Anyway, the report of the report notes that the report reported internal discussions at OpenAI leveraging a sidebar for advertising related to user questions and input, with the report reportedly reporting that OpenAI has considered, quote, showing them only when the conversation moves towards shopping or similar activities, or a secondary step where ads are displayed only when someone clicks a link in ChatGPT's results, end quote. The main concern to us is that this is kind of like a slippery slope to shaping ChatGPT's responses. So if they're talking about maybe, only using it when it's a topic that's like shopping or something where it seems relatively innocuous or like a natural fit or whatever, it is a slippery slope to an event horizon, which is the sponsored content. And so there would be an inherent bias, whether that's by human or by machine at this point, that's kind of learned to move people towards that purchasing funnel, even if the query maybe starts out without a need to buy something. Maybe the user's not asking about comparing two products and shopping. Maybe they're asking about some other problem they're trying to solve, and it's like, oh, there's actually a solution for that. You could buy it here on Amazon or whatever. So that's kind of the concern we have. Now, different from sort of standard advertising is that ChatGPT has a unique and maybe terrifying amount of information on some people. So it's up to what you want to share with these tools, but people get, kind of weirdly intimate with some of this stuff, and that would give the utilities a unique ability to gaslight and manipulate users into sponsored content funnels that I think would be a lot more effective than your sort of standard pre-roll ad, like what you saw in this video or what you see from Google AdSense before or after this video, whatever. And it would have a lot more information to be a lot more effective potentially. And for some people who use it, it might be on people who are more prone to falling for bullshit and scams too. We've seen, like with Facebook, that scams all the time pop up through these advertising platforms and networks. YouTube certainly has its fair share of a lot of that kind of thing, and AI bullshit ads too. So anyway, kind of concerning to us. The way people use ChatGPT, it just has a lot more access to a lot more intimate details than a search engine, and I think it could build a much more complete profile about its users with kind of terrifying accuracy, and it's better equipped to approximate or try to model how someone thinks and how they respond to different outputs from the tool, and could then interface with marketing. You could see it maybe moving you towards some kind of advertorial response instead that is more easily disguised, sort of native to the ChatGPT output, meaning it looks like just a normal ChatGPT output, where, I don't know, you have users like, "Dear ChatGPT, my cat ate too fast and on the carpet, how do I clean it?" You can see it kind of like, oh, you know what you need is this specific product. And I just think that in this particular environment, that's going to be more effective at blending in than, say, a Google sponsored search result, which does exist and is its own problem, but where they stuff ads at the top of the search results. But you've got kind of that clean break, and I think people are pretty good, at least in our audience, at identifying the gap between those two things. So anyway, this to me looks like it's moving more in the direction of sponsored content, where the break between advertising and sponsored content is when the entirety of the output is paid for by an agency, and that might include dictation over what is said specifically. So on YouTube, sponsored content is when channels will do a video where the entirety of the video is paid for, pitched, supplied by the company to cover a specific message for the brand. We don't do these. We reject that type of advertising. The ads we do are called pre-rolls. Those run, at the beginning of the video, and it lasts like 30 seconds or a minute or something. Different from sponsored content, where it's the entirety of the content is just an advertisement. And so I think that's more the direction ChatGPT would want to go based on what we read here, because that would be sort of the more native integration that blends in. It's worth a lot more money. People fall for it all the time. You can kind of pitch this sort of independence where really in reality there's not any. Anyway, that's kind of the news from ChatGPT. They're going to want to make money at some point because they're not right now, and that seems like it would be a quick avenue to do so. A new report from Taiwanese media publication UDN suggests that TSMC, or Taiwan Semiconductor's wafer prices will increase for its most advanced nodes over the next 4 years. Via machine translation, the post states that TSMC has demand far outstripping supply for its nodes below 3 nanometers. These are earmarked heavily for AI chip manufacturing. UDN says that TSMC will roll out higher prices starting in 2026 and increase prices across, quote, 4 consecutive years from 2026 to 2029, end quote. The publication also wrote, quote, however, even with TSMC's price increase proposals, clients are still actively booking advanced process capacity, indicating the AI arms race shows no signs of abating, end quote. The publication also cites analysts as expecting a 3% to 10% increase in advanced process silicon in 2026. Now, although this is kind of framed as targeting AI companies for the cost increases, it will affect consumers too. A lot of that is because for supply, TSMC is really kind of it. So DRAM, memory modules, storage, that can come from a few different places. But for high-end GPUs and CPUs, it's primarily TSMC. Intel's still trying to get its advanced fabs operational and get big customers for them. So most of this does come from TSMC. China's tech industry has managed to just prototype its first domestic EUV, or extreme ultraviolet lithography, machines for fabrication, which could get their fabs operational and competitive at some point with other fabs that exist in the West and in Taiwan. As of now, though, TSMC holds the keys to NVIDIA, Intel, and AMD products, and NVIDIA has already been increasing margins beyond just simply accounting for its own cost increases, so this is going to further compound. It's percentages on top of percentages here, and they've been increasing the margin. Micron's been increasing margin on consumer products, so you're just going to see this keep kind of stacking, where you can't outbid companies as an end user. And so even if the supply is going to companies for this stuff, it's going to affect your pricing too. So anyway, that's it for hardware news this week. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more as always. Go to store.gamersaccess.net to help us out directly. Keep an eye out for the Disappointment PC build coming up. That'll be a lot of fun. And I hope you all have a good new year, and we'll see you soon in the first videos for 2026. See you all next time.